What would you do if your entire division simply disappeared in the middle of the largest tank battle in history? How could 200 tanks and over 3,000 men vanish without a trace on the blood-soaked fields of Kursk? And why did both German and Soviet records deliberately erase any mention of this unit from their official histories? You're about to hear the disturbing story of the 24th Panzer Division and the men who drove into hell on July 12, 1943, never to be seen again. Let's begin. It's early July 1943, and the German Wehrmacht is about to launch Operation Citadel, the largest offensive on the Eastern Front since the invasion of the Soviet Union 2 years earlier. The target is a massive bulge in the Soviet lines near the small Russian city of Kursk, a salient jutting westward into German-held territory like a fist ready to punch. High Command believes that if they can pinch off this bulge from the north and south, they'll encircle hundreds of thousands of Soviet troops and turn the tide of the war back in Germany's favor. It's an ambitious plan, perhaps the last real chance Germany has to regain the initiative in the east. But what they don't know yet is that the Soviets are expecting them. The Germans are assembling an unprecedented force for this offensive. Nearly 780,000 men, 2,400 tanks and assault guns, and close to 1,800 aircraft are being concentrated around Kursk. Among these forces are some of Germany's most elite units, brand new Tiger and Panther tanks that represent the cutting edge of armored warfare, and battle-hardened divisions that have survived 2 brutal years of combat on the Eastern Front. The firepower being assembled is staggering, and German commanders are confident. They have to be. Because failure here doesn't just mean losing ground, it means losing the war. But there's one unit in this massive assembly that nobody talks about anymore. A ghost formation that appears in some documents but vanishes from others. The 24th Panzer Division. On paper, the 24th Panzer Division looks like any other German armored formation of mid-1943. It's composed of 2 panzer regiments equipped with a mix of Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs, the workhorses of the German tank force at Kursk. There are Panzer Grenadier battalions for infantry support, artillery units, reconnaissance teams, and all the logistical elements needed to keep an armored division functioning in combat. The division numbers roughly 200 tanks and 3,000 men, a respectable force that should make a significant contribution to the coming offensive. Its commander is General Major Friedrich Kessler, a veteran of the French campaign and the early victories in Russia, known for his aggressive tactics and his loyalty to his men. The division arrives at the staging area south of Kursk in late June, assigned to the southern pincer of the attack under Hermann Hoth's 4th Panzer Army. The men are exhausted from their journey, their vehicles caked in dust and mud, but spirits are cautiously optimistic. They've been told this will be the decisive blow, the operation that breaks the back of Soviet resistance. Some believe it. Others have learned to be skeptical of such promises after 2 years of setbacks and retreats. As they settle into their positions, something strange begins to happen. The division is moved repeatedly, reassigned from one corps to another, shifted between assembly areas without clear explanation. First they're attached to 2 SS Panzer Corps, then to XLVII Panzer Corps, then back again. Radio communications become sporadic and confused. Supply convoys meant for the 24th are diverted to other units. Officers requesting clarification on their operational sector receive contradictory orders or no response at all. The men start to notice the looks they receive from soldiers in other divisions. Not hostility exactly, but something close to it. Unease. As if the 24th Panzer Division carries some invisible contamination. Veterans whisper that the unit is cursed, that it's being deliberately isolated. Some tankers joke darkly that they've become the Geister Division, the Ghost Division, visible only when command needs someone for a suicide mission. But this was just the beginning of something far stranger. On the night of July 4th, less than 24 hours before Operation Citadel is scheduled to begin, General Major Kessler receives new orders. The 24th Panzer Division is being detached from 4th Panzer Army entirely. Instead, they're to move independently to a small village called Yakovlevo, about 15 kilometers behind the planned breakthrough sector, and await further instructions. The order makes no tactical sense. Yakovlevo isn't a staging area or a strategic objective. It's barely marked on military maps, just a cluster of wooden buildings surrounded by wheat fields and gentle hills. Kessler protests through the proper channels, but the response is immediate and unambiguous. The order comes from the highest levels of Army Group South. The division is to move to Yakovlevo immediately, maintain radio silence once they arrive, and hold position until contacted directly by a special liaison officer who will provide their combat assignment. Disobedience will be considered insubordination in the face of the enemy. Kessler has no choice but to comply. So on that warm summer evening, as the rest of the German army makes final preparations for the assault that will begin at dawn, the 24th Panzer Division packs up and rolls east toward Yakovlevo. The column stretches for kilometers, tanks and half-tracks and supply trucks grinding through the darkness, headlights off to avoid detection by Soviet reconnaissance aircraft. The men are confused and angry. They've been preparing for weeks to join the main offensive, and now they're being sent away from the battle before it even begins. What possible reason could command have for pulling an entire armored division out of the line at the last minute? They reach Yakovlevo just before midnight and spread out into defensive positions around the village as ordered. And then they wait. Above them, the summer sky is clear and full of stars. To the north and west, they can hear the distant rumble of German artillery beginning the preparatory bombardment that signals the start of Operation Citadel. The greatest tank battle in history is beginning without them, and nobody can explain why. The morning of July 5 passes in strange quiet. Radio silence means the division is cut off from the command network, receiving no news about how the offensive is progressing. The men can hear the battle in the distance, the thunder of thousands of guns and the shriek of Stukas diving on Soviet positions, but they are stuck in Yakovlevo doing nothing. Some tankers use the time to perform maintenance on their vehicles. Others try to sleep or write letters home. Many simply sit and smoke and wonder what the hell is going on. Then late in the afternoon, a single Kubelwagen approaches the division command post carrying 2 officers. Neither man wears normal Wehrmacht insignia. Their uniforms are unmarked except for rank badges, and they refuse to identify which unit they represent. They ask for General Major Kessler by name and spend 3 hours in closed conference with him and his senior staff. None of the other officers or men are allowed anywhere near the meeting. When it finally ends and the 2 mysterious officers depart, Kessler emerges looking shaken. He orders the division to prepare to move out at first light on July 12, exactly 1 week from now. Their objective will be provided when the time comes. Until then, they are to remain in position and maintain absolute radio silence. 7 days. The 24th Panzer Division sits at Yakovlevo for 7 agonizing days while the Battle of Kursk rages without them. They listen to the continuous roar of artillery. They watch German aircraft flying overhead toward the front. Occasionally wounded soldiers from other units pass through the area, and from them the tankers of the 24th piece together fragments of information about the offensive. The Northern Pincer under model is making slow progress against fanatical Soviet resistance. In the south, Hoffer's panzers are pushing deeper, smashing through defensive belts and racing toward the key town of Prokhorovka. The battle is enormous, brutal, and still undecided. But the 24th Panzer Division remains at Yakovlevo, isolated and ignored, waiting for orders that don't come. On the evening of July 11, General Major Kessler assembles his officers. His face is pale and his hands shake slightly as he spreads a map across the hood of his command vehicle. Tomorrow, he tells them, they will finally see action. But not in the way anyone expected. The division's objective is a sector of front approximately 30 kilometers east of Prokhorovka, well beyond the German lines and deep in Soviet-held territory. They are to punch through the Soviet rear areas, capture a specific set of coordinates, and hold that position for 24 hours to allow unspecified, specialist units to complete their mission. After 24 hours, the division is to withdraw back to German lines by whatever route remains open. The operation is classified at the highest level. Absolute operational security is mandatory. Any questions? The officers stare at Kessler in stunned silence. What he's describing isn't a military operation, it's suicide. Sending a single division 30 kilometers behind enemy lines during the middle of the largest battle on the Eastern Front is insanity. They'll be cut off immediately, surrounded by Soviet reserves, and destroyed piecemeal. There's no mention of air support, no coordination with other units, no clear explanation of what these specialist units are supposed to accomplish that's worth sacrificing 3,000 men and 200 tanks. Several officers begin to object, but Kessler cuts them off. "The orders come from the very top," he says. "From people who don't tolerate disobedience. The division will move out at 0400 hours. Dismissed." That night, the men of the 24th Panzer Division prepare for what many of them suspect will be their last mission. Tankers check ammunition loads and fuel levels. Gunners calibrate their sights. Infantry soldiers sharpen their bayonets and write final letters to their families. Nobody sleeps much. The mood is grim and fatalistic. Even the youngest soldiers, the ones who still believe in victory and the Führer and all the propaganda they've been fed, can sense that something is terribly wrong with this operation. At 0345 hours on July 12, 1943, the 24th Panzer Division forms up into attack columns and begins moving east from Yakovlevo toward the Soviet lines. It's still dark, though the sky is beginning to lighten in the east. The tanks advance in a tight formation, engines roaring, tracks churning up clouds of dust. Reconnaissance vehicles fan out ahead, probing for weak points in the Soviet defensive positions. The plan, such as it is, calls for speed and violence. They'll blast through the first line of Soviet troops before anyone realizes what's happening, then race east at maximum speed before Soviet armor can react. And that's exactly what they do. At 0430 hours, the lead elements of the 24th crash into a Soviet rifle regiment that's dug in along a small river. The Russians are taken completely by surprise. They're positioned to defend against attacks from the west, from the direction of the main German offensive at Prokhorovka, not from the south where the 24th is coming from. German tanks tear through the defensive positions, firing high explosive shells into trenches and bunkers. Panzer Grenadiers follow close behind, mopping up survivors. Within 45 minutes, the Soviet line is shattered and the 24th is racing through the gap into open country beyond. For the next 3 hours, the division drives east at maximum speed. They bypass Soviet strongpoints, ignore isolated units, and focus solely on covering ground. It's a textbook exploitation, the kind of aggressive armored warfare that German panzer divisions have perfected over 4 years of war. Soviet commanders are slow to react, confused about where this new German force has come from and where it's headed. Radio intercepts picked up by the 24th's signals units reveal growing panic among Soviet headquarters as reports come in about German tanks appearing where no German tanks should be. But the easy part is almost over. As the sun rises higher and the morning wears on, Soviet resistance begins to stiffen. The 24th starts encountering Soviet tanks, first in small groups, then in larger formations. Running battles break out along the division's flanks as T-34s and KV-1s attempt to slow or stop the German advance. The panzer crews fight with the skill and experience of veterans, knocking out Soviet tanks at long range with their superior optics and gunnery, but they're taking losses too. Panzer III's brew up when hit by 76mm shells. Panzer IV's throw tracks or break down under the strain of the high-speed advance. The division is stretched out over kilometers now, the tight formation of the initial attack dissolving into a long, vulnerable column. At approximately 0830 hours, the 24th Panzer Division reaches the coordinates they were ordered to secure. It's a low ridge overlooking a shallow valley, completely unremarkable terrain that offers no obvious tactical value. Nevertheless, General Major Kessler orders the division to establish a defensive perimeter. Tanks take up hull-down positions along the ridge. Infantry dig hasty fighting positions. Artillery batteries set up in the valley below, ready to provide fire support. The division has accomplished its mission, such as anyone can understand it. Now they have to hold this position for 24 hours until the mysterious specialist units arrive to do whatever it is they're supposed to do. But those specialist units never come. Instead, what comes is the Red Army. By mid-morning, Soviet commanders have figured out what's happened and they react with overwhelming force. Tank brigades are diverted from the fighting at Prokhorovka and sent east to destroy this impudent German penetration. Artillery regiments are repositioned to bring the ridge under fire. Waves of Sturmovix, the feared Soviet ground attack aircraft, appear overhead and begin pounding the German positions with bombs and rockets. The 24th Panzer Division is completely surrounded and under attack from every direction. The fighting that follows is savage and desperate. Soviet tanks charge the German positions in mass attacks, taking horrific losses but gradually wearing down the defenders through sheer weight of numbers. German tank crews fight with professional skill, each kill requiring precious ammunition they can't replace. Panzer Grenadiers beat back Soviet infantry assaults, but their casualties mount with each attack. The artillery batteries fire continuously until their barrels glow red hot, then fire some more until they run out of shells. There's no resupply. No reinforcements. No air support. The 24th is alone, cut off deep behind enemy lines, and dying by inches. General Major Kessler tries repeatedly to establish radio contact with higher headquarters, but every transmission goes unanswered. It's as if the division has ceased to exist in the eyes of the German High Command. Some officers suggest attempting a breakout back to German lines, but Kessler refuses. His orders were to hold the position for 24 hours, and he's a soldier who follows orders even when those orders make no sense. So the 24th stays on that nameless ridge and fights and bleeds and waits for help that never comes. By evening, the situation is catastrophic. More than half the division's tanks have been destroyed or disabled. Ammunition is almost exhausted. Casualties are approaching 40%. The ridge is carpeted with dead and wounded men from both sides. Soviet attacks continue without pause, each wave a little stronger than the last as fresh units arrive to join the battle. The defenders are physically and mentally exhausted, running on pure adrenaline and desperation. They know they can't hold out much longer. As night falls on July 12, General Major Kessler makes the decision to attempt a withdrawal under cover of darkness. The specialist units never arrived. The 24 hours are almost up. There's no point in staying on this ridge just to die. He issues orders for the division to break out to the west in company-sized groups, each element taking the best route it can find back toward German lines. It's every unit for itself now. May God have mercy on them all. And that's when things get truly strange. Because according to every historical record, German and Soviet alike, that's the last anyone ever heard from the 24th Panzer Division. The withdrawal begins just after midnight on July 13th. The surviving elements of the 24th Panzer Division, battered and depleted but still organized into cohesive combat units, abandon their positions on the ridge and begin moving west through the darkness. They adopt the tactics they've learned through bitter experience, moving in small groups, avoiding main roads, using terrain for concealment. It's a fighting retreat, with rear guards engaging pursuing Soviet forces to buy time for the main body to slip away. Soviet units track the German withdrawal and harass it relentlessly. Artillery fire follows the retreating columns. Tank units positioned in their path force them into costly firefights. But the Germans are still dangerous, still capable of inflicting losses on anyone who gets too close. Several Soviet company-sized units that try to intercept the retreat are mauled or destroyed by the desperate Germans. It's chaos in the darkness, confused combat where nobody is quite sure who's who or where the front lines are anymore. Multiple Soviet after-action reports from the morning of July 13 mention contact with elements of an unidentified German armored formation moving west through their rear areas. Tank crews report engaging German Panzer IIIs and IVs. Infantry commanders report German mechanized units passing through their sectors. Pilots flying dawn reconnaissance missions spot German vehicle columns moving cross-country. All of these sightings are in roughly the same area, a corridor about 20 kilometers wide stretching from the ridge where the 24th made its stand back toward the German lines near Prokhorovka. But then the sightings stop. Completely and abruptly. The last confirmed contact with any element of the 24th Panzer Division occurs at approximately 0730 hours on July 13, when a Soviet tank company engages what it describes as approximately 30 German tanks and associated vehicles in a brief firefight near a small forest about 10 kilometers east of Prokhorovka. The Soviet commander reports destroying several German vehicles before the rest of the column broke contact and continued moving west into the tree line. He requests air support to finish them off, but by the time aircraft arrive on station 20 minutes later, there's nothing to see. The forest is empty. No tanks, no vehicles, no sign that hundreds of German soldiers had just passed through. And that's it. After that moment, the 24th Panzer Division simply vanishes. Not destroyed in battle with a clear record of what happened. Not captured with survivors to tell the tale. Not scattered and absorbed into other units. Just gone, as if the entire formation drove into that forest and ceased to exist. Soviet forces conducting sweeps of the area over the following days find some evidence of the division's passage. Abandoned vehicles, equipment, spent ammunition casings. They discover several mass graves containing bodies of German soldiers, probably men who died of wounds during the retreat and were buried by their comrades. But the numbers don't add up. Based on the size of the force that fought on the ridge on July 12, there should have been at least 1,500 to 2,000 survivors attempting to make it back to German lines. Soviet units should have found hundreds of destroyed vehicles, thousands of bodies, scores of prisoners. Instead, they find traces, fragments, evidence of a much smaller force. German records are even more confusing. In the official Wehrmacht records of units participating in Operation Citadel, the 24th Panzer Division doesn't appear at all. Not listed among the casualties. Not mentioned in situation reports. It's as if the division never existed in the first place. When historians after the war began studying the Battle of Kursk and compiling orders of battle for the German forces involved, they found references to the 24th in some documents but not in others, creating a confusing paper trail that leads nowhere. Individual personnel files are similarly baffling. Families of soldiers who served in the 24th Panzer Division received the standard notification that their loved ones were missing in action in the East, but no details about when, where, or under what circumstances. After the war, investigations by the German Red Cross and other organizations attempting to account for missing soldiers found that records for men assigned to the 24th had been deliberately removed from Wehrmacht archives or marked with cryptic notations that suggested the files had been classified by German military intelligence. General Major Friedrich Kessler's personnel file contains perhaps the strangest entry of all. According to official records, Kessler died on July 8, 1943, 4 days before his division's final battle, in an aviation accident while traveling between field headquarters. But there are no details about this accident, no crash site investigation, no witnesses. And multiple documents from July 9 through July 12 contain references to orders issued by or communications received from Kessler, suggesting he was still alive and commanding the 24th well after his supposed death. So what happened to the 24th Panzer Division? Where did they go? And why would both German and Soviet authorities want to erase all record of their existence? In the decades since the war ended, several theories have been proposed to explain the disappearance of the 24th Panzer Division, each more disturbing than the last. The first theory is the simplest: the division was destroyed during its withdrawal and the records were lost or destroyed in the chaos of the war. This is certainly possible. Millions of documents were lost when Germany collapsed in 1945, and there are plenty of units whose exact fates remain unclear. But this theory doesn't explain why both German and Soviet records contain evidence that the 24th was deliberately erased from the historical record, not merely lost to the fog of war. It doesn't explain the mysterious orders sending them on a suicide mission into Soviet territory, or the specialist units that were supposed to join them but never arrived, or the abrupt cessation of all sightings after July 13. The second theory suggests the 24th stumbled into some sort of secret military installation or operation that Soviet authorities wanted to keep hidden. Perhaps the ridge they were ordered to capture overlooked a classified weapons testing site, or a headquarters bunker containing high-value targets. When the 24th came too close to this secret, they were annihilated and all evidence of their presence was systematically destroyed to protect operational security. This theory has some merit. Both sides conducted numerous classified operations during the war that remained secret for decades. But again, the details don't quite fit. If the Soviets wiped out the entire division, where are the destroyed vehicles and the thousands of bodies? Mass graves can be hidden, but 200 burning tanks are hard to miss. The third theory is darker and more conspiratorial. It suggests the 24th Panzer Division was deliberately sacrificed as part of some high-level political or military intrigue within the German command structure. Perhaps they knew too much about something they shouldn't have, or their commander had made enemies in the SS or Gestapo, or they were used as pawns in a power struggle between competing factions of the Nazi leadership. According to this theory, the mysterious orders sending them deep behind Soviet lines were designed to ensure the division's destruction, and the subsequent cover-up was orchestrated by the same people who ordered them to their deaths. It's a chilling possibility, but one that's difficult to prove without access to documents that may no longer exist, if they ever existed at all. And then there's the fourth theory, the one that nobody likes to talk about but that keeps appearing in discussions among military historians and researchers. This theory suggests that something else happened to the 24th Panzer Division in that forest east of Prokhorovka on the morning of July 13, 1943. Something that couldn't be explained, couldn't be recorded in official documents, and had to be classified at levels above top secret to prevent knowledge of it from spreading. Proponents of this theory point to unusual details in the few surviving records. The way Soviet air reconnaissance pilots reported atmospheric distortions over the forest where the 24th was last seen. The fact that seismograph stations as far away as Moscow recorded what they described as anomalous vibrations at precisely the time the division disappeared. Unconfirmed reports from Soviet soldiers who entered the forest days later and claimed to have found vehicles and equipment that looked like they'd been exposed to extreme heat, far beyond what any conventional weapon of the era could produce. Some researchers have even suggested connections to German experimental weapons programs, speculating that the specialist units that were supposed to rendezvous with the 24th were carrying prototype devices for testing, weapons so advanced and destructive that their accidental activation could have vaporized everything in the immediate area. There were indeed several classified German weapons projects operating in the Kursk region during the battle, but none of the declassified documents from these programs mention any connection to the 24th Panzer Division. The truth is, we simply don't know. The 24th Panzer Division drove into that forest on July 13, 1943, and never came out. 3,000 men and 200 tanks vanished as completely as if they'd never existed. The families of those men never learned what happened to their sons, fathers, brothers, and husbands. The soldiers of other units who knew about the 24th were warned never to speak of it. And when the war ended and historians began piecing together the story of the Battle of Kursk, the greatest tank battle in history, they found a hole in the records where an entire division used to be. In 1956, a German veterans organization dedicated to finding missing soldiers sent a small team to the Kursk region to investigate the disappearance of the 24th. Soviet authorities denied them permission to access the site where the division vanished. In 1973, a Soviet journalist writing a book about the Battle of Kursk found references to the 24th in declassified documents and attempted to research their fate. His manuscript was seized by the KGB, and he was warned that continuing his investigation would be considered spreading false information harmful to Soviet-German relations. After the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, Russian military historians gained access to previously classified archives and found that entire sections of the records from July 1943 had been removed or destroyed, including all files related to Soviet operations in the specific sector where the 24th disappeared. Whatever happened to those men, whatever fate befell them in the forests and fields east of Prokhorovka, someone decided very early on that it had to remain secret. Not just classified. Not just hidden. Erased. As if the 24th Panzer Division had never existed at all. Kursk may be remembered as the clash that sealed Germany's fate, but the men of the 24th Panzer vanished into a silence no victory parade could break. Their story isn't found in textbooks, just in the haunting gaps and erased names left behind. Sometimes, the greatest mysteries aren't lost on battlefields, they're buried by those who decided the truth was simply too dangerous to reveal.